Hello and welcome to the Diary of an Age Grouper podcast. My name is Jamie Edwards and I'm a full-time professional endurance coach, age group triathlete and triathlon fan. The Diary of an Age Grouper podcast is all about content relevant to age groupers. We'll talk to athletes, coaches and experts who walk the walk. On this episode of the Diary of an Age Grouper, we talk to Dan Plews. Dan has risen to fame in the triathlon world over the past 5 years or so, and we could have him on as a coach or an expert in HRV, nutrition strategies, or heat acclimation. But we wanted to talk to him about how he trains and how he races. There's a lot of detail in this one, and we cover many topics, including planning the year, goal setting, weekly schedule, and go-to sessions. This is a very insightful conversation with Dan Plews, the age group triathlete, one of the best age group triathletes in the world. This is the Diary of an Age Grouper. Dan, thank you for coming on and speaking with us today. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thanks for having me on, Jamie. Been a while to connect, but I think you first contacted me about 2 months ago, or maybe even longer. I can't remember, but yeah.
Well, I wasn't going to mention that, but seeing as you brought it up, you're definitely a hard man to get a hold of, but that's okay. Worth the wait, I think.
Yeah, 2023 was a year I put a lot of things off, and then someone said, so I actually finished my last race of the year, and someone said to me, "Man, you've been busy," and I went, "Yeah, I've been trying to. Basically, everyone's been trying to get in touch with me. All those people I've been trying to avoid for the past year are now expecting me to cough up and speak to them." So yeah, it was it's been a busy period trying to catch up.
Yeah, well, we'll definitely get into all of that and how 2023 unfolded for you. But before we do that, for those who don't know who you are and what you do, can you just give us a brief overview of your history in the sport as well as your professional roles?
So I've been doing triathlon from an early age. I've done triathlon since I was 9 years old. In the UK, I was brought up in the UK. That's where my triathlon career, I guess, started. I was a pretty good junior, national junior champion, national youth champion. I was lottery funded for a while. And then I guess I never really achieved what I wanted to achieve in that is in the Olympic space. And then I finished my degree in sports science at Loughborough and moved to more of a coaching role and sports science. So I moved and did a master's in sports science at Leeds Metropolitan University, where Alistair Brownlee was at the time, under a scholarship under the British Triathlon Federation. And I guess from there onwards, I've just continued to compete in triathlon at an amateur level, and also pursued my career as a sports scientist. Firstly, a sports scientist, and then moving into just pure coaching. My role is I have a PhD in exercise physiology, 65 publications, 3,000 citations in that area. I still work for a university, have masters and PhD students as well. So I'm very heavily involved in the sports science side of things, but it's kind of applied sports science. I worked for the New Zealand rowing team. Went to the Rio and London Olympics with that team. Still work with the canoe racing Women's New Zealand kayak team, and I was the head of physical performance for America's Cup Emirates Team New Zealand when they won the last America's Cup. So I've been involved in a lot of different sports, but I think the reason we're talking today is my big passion and focus has always been triathlon, where I've competed in myself a lot. And I coach a lot of high-level professionals like Javier Gomez, Chelsea Sodaro, Jan van Berkel before he retired, and Aaron Royal. So yeah, that's a kind of bit of an overview, I guess.
That was a lifetime in a few minutes, so you've done well there, I think. So rumor has it you've retired from age group racing now. Is that true? And what is the next athletic goal?
Yeah, I've totally retired from I've definitely retired. I think I always kind of knew that I wanted to do something a little bit more and then once I achieved the goal and there's really nothing left to do, I was going to retire. So yeah, I think no more triathlon racing for me, and I get a lot of pleasure out of the coaching that I do as well. So that keeps me pretty occupied. And now I'm just really focused on I'm actually focused on getting stronger, getting bigger. So I've been hitting the gym a lot. I've got a goal of packing on a bit of muscle. So I'm in a bit of a bulk phase at the moment, which has been it's been really interesting, like a total shifting everything that I've been doing. I've managed to put on 7 kilos since Ironman California already. And yeah, it's been really good. It's really, the eating's a massive part of it. And you go from, when you're an endurance athlete, you go from permanently being slightly hungry and trying to almost like keep lean, keep a little bit underfed, to having to eat more than you actually really want to eat. And it's just really, really, really different. But I've been actually really enjoying it, and I've seen some massive improvements and massive gains really quickly. So that's been cool.
That's interesting. That could probably be a podcast in itself, but we'll
Oh yeah,
we'll stay on track.
I could talk about that for. I mean, it's a really interesting topic, and I'm sure when I'm only early days at the moment, and once I've gone down the phases a little bit more and I've done a little bit more in the space, I'm sure it'll have some interesting conversations, because no one has really done that before. And I've got an aim of getting closer to 90 kilos, 95, like 90 kilos when I'm trying to bulk up to that and then cut down a little bit. I mean, I raced at 73, 74. So yeah, and it's all in the aim of strength and longevity, but also trying to keep up my aerobic fitness as well. So we will see. Watch this space.
All right, we will. Now you've gone out on top. You've had a strong race at Roth earlier this year, and then you raced Ironman California and clocked the fastest age group time on record. Do you have a highlight from your athletic career? Is it this year? Is it Kona back in 2018, or is it something else earlier in your career that, if you had to sort of pick one thing you're maybe most proud of, or your best all-round performance, even if that wasn't, winning your age group or winning the overall age group race?
Yeah.
Is there anything you could put your finger on?
Yeah, I mean, I've had a few good races. I mean, if I really wind the clock back a long way, one of the first things that springs to mind was when I was 15 and I won the National Youth Championships. For some reason, that's edged in my memory a lot, because it was something that I really, really went for. And basically, I finished. It was in 1997, so a long time ago, that I finished that season, and and I'd been like out the water 2 minutes behind the best athletes, the best people of my age all year round, and I just could never really catch up. And then I spent the whole of the winter swimming 5 times a week, really working on my swimming, and basically my swimming got 2 minutes quicker over the course of the winter. And I went from being 2 minutes behind to being in the lead group out of the water, and I ended up winning the national champs. And I just remember, I'll always remember that, because no one expected it, and I remember I gave a few people a shock. So definitely, even all these years on, I can still remember it so vividly. And then the other two would have to say, like Kona in 2018. I think that was also edged in my memory forever, and that was one of my best ever races. Easily, I would definitely say it was probably a better race than California if you look at the times and whatnot. I think, and it was almost a perfect day with nothing went wrong really. So I was really lucky on that. And then I think Ironman California was a really special race. I think, like, one of the things is that you go for a goal, and when you achieve, I was very specific around getting that goal of trying to break 8 hours, and when you achieve something that you've really set your mind to for just over a year, it's kind of special to do it. And when you're doing it, and it's going to be your last race, having raced since for the amount of years, nearly 30 years, like I have, it's kind of a bit of a special feeling to have that. I've done a lot of racing. I mean, I can't imagine how many races I've done in my lifetime, but it was nice to be leading, to knowing that I was almost achieving what I wanted to achieve, and knowing that it was going to be kind of the end of an era as well. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, well, they're three pretty good performances to hang your hat on. I think most other age groupers would take even just one of those. So we're going to get into a few of those things. Probably not going to go right back to
50.
1997 and you as a youth and a junior, but definitely want to talk to you about Kona in 2018. But we're going to start off with this year. So can you tell us what your goals for the year were heading into this season or heading into 2023? And you know what the plan was, because you haven't mentioned it yet, but Roth was in there, and you did race at Roth. So yeah, can you sort of start from the beginning of the year and how it all came about?
Yeah, so to basically since 2018, I hadn't done one race, so one Ironman race. So I did after I finished Kona in 2018. I kind of thought, oh, I probably won't do any more racing after that. But I think but I kind of kept on keeping pretty fit and keeping on training. So maybe in the back of my mind that there was something that wasn't really um, I wasn't satisfied with. I did one race in 2020, 70.3 Taupo. And the main reason I did that was because my dad was racing, had qualified for the World 70.3 champs that was supposed to be in Taupo that year. Inevitably, it wasn't because of COVID. But my dad said, "Oh, it'd be really nice if we could do that race together." And I did that just to get a slot so we could then do the World Championships together at the end of the year. That didn't happen. So and apart from that race, I hadn't raced, and I wasn't going to race at all since 2018. But then October 2022, I turned 40, and I guess I had this underlying desire to do something a little bit more in the Ironman space, and for myself, in that I'd never really done a fast time. My fastest time was 8:24 in Kona, which is not a very fast course, and I was talking to like Thorsten Rad, who's from Tri Rating, and he was saying, well, if you pick the right course, you've got 20 minutes alone in time. Like, you could be 20 minutes faster than that just for the sake of a course. So, if you get a bit fitter and you do some other advantages, shoes, aerodynamics, you could be close to breaking 8 hours. So it was always the first aim was to do a faster time. And then a kind of, I guess, a secret kind of pie in the sky goal was to try and break 8 hours if I could. And that was kind of the goal for all of 2023. So I started the year, I did an 8-week build at the end of 2022 to do Ironman New Zealand, which was in December, which was the race that should have been in March, which was cancelled. So I did that on an 8-week build. I had an okay race there. I was still, I think I was still 15 minutes slower than I was when I did it in 2018 on a bit of a wetty and crappy day in terms of the weather. So I did that, and then but the main aim was to kind of say, okay, let's see where I'm at and see if I can kind of rekindle some form to get back to where I was in 2018. So that went well. It wasn't brilliant, and then I did a 70.3 in March in Taupo, and I won the overall age group in that, and I had a much better race, and I sort of started seeing some numbers that were comparative to what I'd done in 2018, and then kind of planned the year with the aim was always to try and go sub-8 in Roth. I picked a good course. Roth looked like it was on paper a fast course. It's slightly short on the bike and slightly short on the run as well, so that always helps. So that was kind of the aim to go sub-8 in Roth, and I went out to Europe and had a good prep because I was there for 3 weeks before the race with Chelsea and Jan doing a bit of prep, but unfortunately I got an Achilles injury, and I didn't hardly do any running. I didn't run for nearly 2 weeks before the race, and then I managed to start running a week before, but the preparation was not very good. It was far from ideal. I had really sore legs going into the race. And the race, I mean, when I look at the race itself, it was a really, really good race, and it's all I could have asked for and done on that day. But I couldn't. But from a preparation standpoint, I knew there was a bit left on the table.
Okay, and that's where the idea of going to California was born. So we'll touch on that in a minute. So there's a couple of things in there, just in regards to your training. So you said after 2018, so between 2018, other than that one race, I think you said in 2021, you didn't really race,
yeah,
but
2020.
Yeah,
Yeah.
2020, sorry. And yeah, you didn't really race, but you're keeping yourself fit. So I'm interested to hear about how what your training looks like when you're not in an Ironman or Iron distance race block.
Yeah.
And then also, then we'll transition into, okay, what do you then do when you step up? So what does it look like when you're just sort of, what does Dan Plews do to just keep fit?
Yeah, I guess I was doing between 10 and 15 hours of training a week, which for most people they would consider training, but I don't really consider that. I consider that more exercise than training. And that would consist. I was still getting out on the weekends and doing a long run. I was getting out doing a longer ride as well on the weekends. But yeah, it was pretty ad hoc, to be honest. I didn't really have a structure. I just kind of did what I felt like doing on various days. I had a few little races, like single races, that kept me occupied. So I did like a few mountain bike races. I did some half marathons. That definitely helped with being a bit more focused from here and there. But I did that, and I was doing strength training twice a week as well. But it was more like Tabata type circuits. 1 minute on, 20 seconds off of, 10 exercises, 3 rounds sort of thing, twice a week. But yeah, just getting in with the squad. We have a great swim squad, Swim Smooth Auckland here. And, I was getting in with them every 3 times a week as well. So it was just doing things that I wanted to do more than anything. I enjoy doing a long run on the weekends. I enjoy going out on a long ride with my mates on a Saturday. I enjoy going to the swim squad 3 times a week. I enjoy doing the strength training sessions, and it's kind of like it's so ingrained in me that I wake up in the morning and I do some training. That's it. That's the end of it. Just like everyone, most people wake up and brush their teeth. I get up and I always do something. So yeah, it was just really ticking over, to be honest, and with a little bit of intensity from the swimming, but mostly just endurance work.
Yeah, okay. So it's almost incidental for you, and that just happens. Your habits mean that you sort of sit around that 10 or 15 hours and you've got a good mix across swim, bike, and run. You're doing those key things like a
Yeah.
long run, a long ride, your swim squad, some strength
Yeah,
work.
exactly. I mean, you do an hour and a half run on a Sat. You ride for 3 hours on a Saturday. You run for an hour and a half on a Sunday. That's already 4.5 hours. Then you've got basically another 4 hours of swimming, right? So you're already close to 10, right? And then you've got your little bits in between, and it soon gets over 10 easily. So it's not that hard to achieve it, right? So.
Yeah. And it gives you a pretty good platform. So I have to ask about this. You did an 8-week block into Ironman New Zealand in December. And you said, you went quite well considering. So you've come off that platform of 10 or 15 hours, just sort of ticking along. What sort of shifts and changes do you make when you sort of enter into a race block?
Yeah, so I guess then from there I go to 20 to 25 hours. So from 10 to 15 to 20 to 25. But it suddenly becomes a lot more specific. The intervals are longer. I'm just really dialed in with every single session. There's all structure to it. Not just doing what I feel like on a given day. I typically structure my weeks where I go when I'm training properly. I'll structure my weeks where Mondays and Fridays are quite easy days, and then I really do high density Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, where I'll do a lot of solid work, and then Friday, and then Saturday, Sunday a solid as well. So that's kind of how I do it. And but it's all suddenly I'll be doing like some longer threshold sets on the bike, tempo runs. Yeah, and it's just those long rides become 4 or 5 hours with a decent run off. The long runs go up, they get towards 2 hours, even 3. I mean, I remember before I did Taupo, I was doing like a 2 hour run and then a 10K at Ironman pace, for example, built up to doing that. But yeah, these are it just becomes a lot more specific and just more of it.
Yeah, okay. I think we'll go into the full weekly structure and go full details, but maybe we'll save that for when we're talking about California. So you went, I think, 8:18 at Roth. So that was the day that you were originally planning to try and break 8 on that one, I think, was your pie in the sky goal, as you put it.
Yeah.
But obviously with the running injury, you weren't able to do that, and you got through in an 8:18, which is obviously pretty solid. So tell us about how you then pivoted from Roth into California.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I finished Roth, we went into the Swiss mountains, and we're literally on top of a mountain, nothing around, just hanging out really, with the kids and my wife, and it was a real, it was actually Jan van Berkel's um, wife's parents' place, and we were really lucky that we could have some time there. But it was an amazing location. But it really gave me some time to think. And I think even Kate, my wife, she knew that I was a little bit unsatisfied. And in Kate's words, she's like, "Oh well, for the sake of 3 months, what's what's the difference? The time's now. You're not going to get another chance." And she was right, because I wasn't getting any younger. I'd already got a lot of fitness in my back pocket, and to do another build, to stop and do another build again would be really hard. So we kind of made the decision to target a race which would be a fast course. So I did my due diligence, and I looked around looking for a course that I thought could be fast. So I thought about, there was basically, it was between Florida and California in the end. Oh yeah, Florida, California, and Cozumel were the three ones that came up. I think Florida would have been a good choice, but the problem was it was just logistically to get there from New Zealand was a bit of a nightmare, whereas getting to California was a straight flight from San Francisco, so it was a lot easier. Yeah, so I looked at the course. The course actually had never been. It was a bit dodgy. It was a little bit of a risk, because the year before, I think the winner only did 8:55, but apparently it was very windy. And I looked at the course profile, and it was very, very flat. So I knew it was also a downriver swim like Cozumel. Yeah, so that's the one that I inevitably decided to go for.
And yeah, as you said, you would have been carrying pretty good fitness and form after Roth. So what did you do the same in that 3 month block, and what did you do different?
What did I do? What did I do the same? So let me try and think about it. I mean, I actually took a very long break after Roth. I mean, I still kind of ticked over a lot, but we were in Europe for a lot of that for quite a long time after Roth. But I kept on ticking over. I didn't hardly do any swimming, mind, but I just kept on going. Then when we got back to New Zealand, which I think was, when did we get back to New Zealand? I think it was around August, early August. Then I started getting back into the full structure of training, and things were pretty much the same as before. Really, the same type of structure. I didn't really change that much, but I was definitely. But during that period, I started. So what happened with what I typically do with training is I'll build up to doing certain sessions that I believe are very key before I do an Ironman. So, like for one example is I do a very hilly tempo run that I normally do at home. I have a loop in a park where it's like a hilly off-road tempo run, and it's 15K, and I'll do that run. And I've always found that really translates to me running well off the bike in an Ironman. 8 1Ks is another session that I'll do just before I do an Ironman. 3 3Ks off the bike is another session that I do just before an Ironman. And these sessions, this is all running, by the way. Talk about cycling, like 4 by 20 minutes on the bike is a session that I always do before an Ironman. But I always my training all builds towards doing these sessions very well. And the training that I was doing before Roth was building and building, but I never did any of these sessions. So I never did any of the last key sessions that I believe are the real catalyst to kind of really jump you into really great race shape. So the main difference was that I kind of built in, and this time I managed to do all those sessions as well. So that gave me another boost in my overall fitness. And like particularly, I did the 3K sessions faster than I did in 2018 when I won at Kona. So I knew I was in very good shape from just from looking at the data, really. And I'm someone who gets a lot of confidence from objective data, and that was really, really the main difference was the fact that same build, but I got to finish the last 4 weeks properly this time.
Yeah. Okay. So was there any reason why you didn't get to those sessions before Ross?
I was injured.
Because of the righto, gotcha. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Did you still get your bike ones done and your ones done?
Yeah, but I mean, it doesn't mean anything though. That's the thing. Like anyone knows that if you're not running, you bike better, you know?
Yeah.
So it just doesn't, I couldn't take any confidence from it. And to be honest with you, even in Roth itself, I I had no confidence on the bike because I had no confidence in my running. And that was really the thing that hamstrung me on the day is that I, I just didn't have the confidence that I normally have when I'm racing because I felt like I had no run training in me. So I couldn't afford to really dig deep on the bike because if I did, I'd have an even worse run than I thought I was going to have anyway. Um, so yeah, that's one of the main things. It's hard to take any real video or or anything from doing the bike sessions with no running around it. Your legs are fresher, you're not running. Yeah, so it's hard.
Yeah, fair enough. So you've mentioned a few of your go-tos on the run. Are they something that you do one off? Is it once a week for 4 weeks? And what sort of timeline before the
Yeah, I
event are
mean,
you
no,
doing
I mean,
these
it's not.
sessions?
I mean, some of those sessions are a one-off, but you'll still train the similar training type like more than once, right? So you might the session might be 3Ks, but the week before I might do 4 2Ks. You know
Yep.
what I mean? So yeah, and like with the 1Ks, I did that. Did I do it 3 times? I think I did. Yeah, I did that 3 times. So yeah, 3 or 2 times. I can't remember now. I think it was three. Yeah.
Yeah. And you mentioned the 4x20 on the bike. Are there any other go-tos on the bike?
Well, something I always do 100K time trial. That's always one that I'll always do. Always do a 20K run off the bike. At Ironman pace. That's another one that I'll do. Basically, so I'll often do I did the 4x20s twice on the road with and the other I did it one time on the road with a 20K run off. The other time I just did it straight with no run off. But yeah, I'm a big believer. I really think that the thing that most triathletes get wrong is that they just don't go quite long enough in a lot of their intervals. Doing 6 minuters or 8 minuters or making them short. You have to pre-fatigue and you have to go long to really make a difference. So the 100K time trial is a great session because it's totally honest, and I do that at about 10 to 20 watts above what I'd hold in an Ironman. So yeah, so I did
And
that
then
at like
while
290, for example.
Yeah. And while we're at it, we may as well any go-tos for the swim.
I mean, I'm often in just doing what the swim squad's doing. I really think that getting involved in the swim squad is the best thing you can do for your swimming, right? But I mean, I'm part of the swim smooth squad. And that's the kind of philosophy that we adopt across Endure IQ. And it's all built up around threshold sessions. Swimming doesn't change that much through the year. It's typically always going to be like a technique and an endurance session. I'll typically do then a speed session, which might be like 40 50s with every fourth one fast, or 50 max and 150 easy. Then on Wednesday I do like a threshold session, which would be swimming at critical swim speed with short rest, which can be anywhere between 400s and 200s, that sort of thing. Thursday I'll typically have a recovery swim, just 2K continuous swimming, and then Friday we have like what's called in swim smooth is called the red mist session, which is kind of like your sub threshold longer swims, 5K of swimming, where you're doing, it might be a series of 400s or but it's those red mist sessions are designed to be very, very challenging. So longer reps, short turnarounds, really strength building, includes a bit of paddles in there, and they're really good. I'm typically, I mean, even with the pros and the age groups that I coach, I really think that swimming is such a great tool for triathletes to get a lot of training volume with and build up aerobic fitness whilst minimizing injury risk. Like I was swimming 20K a week in the build up to I typically swim 20K a week in the build up to all my Ironman. So that consists of 5K on a Monday, 5K on a Wednesday, 5K on a Friday, 3K on a Tuesday, and a 2K on a Thursday. 5 swims a week, making up to 20K.
Yeah, and you just find that's got a lot of carryover into your overall aerobic
Yeah,
conditioning.
exactly. Yeah, and I think it's really great. It's really great training. Particularly, I mean, I don't really consider myself. I consider myself a bit of a non-swimmer as well, so I find that I thrive off that kind of volume and frequency as well.
Yep. And is there anything you did specifically for the course leading into California? Or were you doing anything knowing that it could be a fast course and a fast day and you're moving at higher speeds than what you're used to?
No, not really. I mean, I was fortunate that I went to Kona for a 2 week stint with Chelsea on a training camp in the build up, and that was good because had the opportunity to get on some faster roads. Whereas in New Zealand, the roads are just super super slow, so bumpy and not very smooth. So they were more similar to the roads in California, which was helpful. But I mean, nothing specific really. Just I mean, I spend most of my time indoors anyway. I only go out on the road at the weekends, and as it would have it, like it rained a lot, and I didn't actually get out on the road as much as I would have liked. But yeah, I typically spend most of my time indoors just because it's a lot more efficient, and I don't really like going on the roads in the middle of the week because it's a little bit too busy. So.
All right. Do you want to just quickly walk us through the race then? Swim,
Um,
bike, run, what went well? Anything not go well?
California,
Yes, California. Yeah.
yeah, California, yeah. So I mean, I think everyone the swim was a bit of a shock. I mean, the swim was a downstream swim, and it was way faster than I was anticipating it to be. But I actually had despite the time, I had a very good swim. I wasn't that far off the front, which is swimming is usually where I'm a little bit down, and I was only just behind some pretty good swimmers. So that was a good swim. And then I got on the bike and I was in second place. And it was just about sticking with my power that I knew I was going to try and hold. And I knew I was going to try and hold between 270 and 280 watts for the Ironman. And I had there was the gentleman up the road was a guy called Sean Mahoney, who's he races for Everyman Jack, and he's a bit of a decent athlete. And I wasn't really catching him at 280 watts. I could see that it just wasn't coming back to me quick enough. So I thought, I'll just close the gap on him, and then we can we both got a bit of company for the rest of the ride. So I did. I ended up doing, I think I did 220 to 230 watts for 8 minutes to close him down. I caught him up, and then I went past and said, hey, let's do 10 minutes each, keeping legal distance, 12 meters apart. And we kind of did that all the way through until about 40, 50K to go, where he just got a little bit tired, I think. And I went through a aid station pretty quick, and then I was on my own from that point on. And then got onto the run. I just really got into my pace. I knew I knew I wanted to run about a 245. That was kind of my aim. So I was running at 355s was my target pace. And that was coming out quite easily, but there's one point where it absolutely poured with rain. Really poured, like to the point where there was actually literally a river going across the tarmac, and it got quite slippy going under some of the bridges. And that was my slowest 10K, was when it was really pouring with rain. So that kind of scuppered my pace a little bit. And it was also it was also quite the back end was my best bit. I had a really solid last 10K. I also had to stop to go to the toilet as well, which was never that great. But apart from that, it was a really good run, I guess. So yeah, can't complain. The run was actually a little bit long as well. It was 42.7 kilometers. So, and I ran through the 42.2 in just under 47 minutes, 247. So it would have been like 246.56 or something. So
Yeah. Okay. So finish time 7:56. Was that right? So
yeah,
swim was correct distance, but current assisted.
Yeah.
Bike's the correct distance, run slightly long. Is that right?
Yeah, and the transitions were mammothly long. 10 minutes worth of transitions.
Yeah, okay, that's quite a while.
Yeah,
Um,
it was a long, the transitions were massive, and it was a really long run from the bike to the from the bike to the transit sorry, from the swim exit to the transition. It was a long, very long, yeah, very long run, which wasn't that pleasant.
yeah, no, they never are when they're long.
Yeah.
T1 in particular, I think.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. Anything else about that race that you think is relevant, or that the block or 2023 as a whole that you think is relevant and
Yeah, I
or
mean, I
interesting for
think
people?
one thing that I didn't do for the whole of 2023 is I didn't take one recovery week, not once.
Mm.
I had easy periods after Roth. I had easy periods after racing, but I've completely fallen out of love with traditional training periodization now. I think it's not backed in any science. I think there's no evidence to suggest it's how things should be done. And for that whole year, I did not take one recovery week. But what I did do is I made sure I never got so tired that I needed a full recovery week. So I kind of just hovered at a higher level with, I found it really worked with blocking the days like I did, with Monday, Friday always being easy, not full rest days. I mean, on a Monday, I was doing swim, bike, run, all easy. And a Friday, I was doing just a swim only. I'd swim 5K and then have the rest of the day off. But I just found that was a way better way of training, especially for an age grouper, because you never know what cards you're going to get dealt in your week. And I think when you're training and you think, oh, I'm going to have a recovery week next week, and then suddenly you're the week before you can't do any training because of something else, it's a real blow. And I just think it keeps training much more fluid when you just disregard the recovery weeks completely and just do shorter recovery periods.
Yeah, that's interesting because I've never really scheduled recovery weeks for people. I might go, a couple of days here and there, or an easier day, like you said, built into a week. But the goal is to never sort of dig people into a hole, and myself as well, where you require a recovery week. And the other thing I say is, as age groupers in particular, life will often deal you your recovery periods. If you've got
Exactly.
illness
Yeah.
in the family or you're traveling or something like that. So I find that interesting. So that was that a conscious decision you made, or that's just how now in reflection you've looked back and you've done it?
I mean, I think it just naturally happened. It wasn't really conscious. But then even if I look back to 2018, I didn't actually take any recovery really either. I think it just happens, right? You travel, you have a race, and I just don't think yeah, I don't think you need it really if you're training right, and now I almost do the same approach with the pros as well. We just don't I just don't give recovery periods, and it's like it keeps everything at a higher level continuously.
Hmm. And for you, is that that includes you flicking between your 10 to 15 hour maintenance week and then into your 20 to 25-hour Ironman block?
Yeah,
That's
exactly. I
what you
mean,
mean?
yeah, I'm talking about even in 2018 when I was training for Kona, I didn't really take full recovery periods then, like weeks then either. So when I look back.
Yeah. All right. Well, speaking of, let's wind back to 2018 and talk about that year. And obviously, it ended at Kona with an 8:24, winning the overall amateur race and setting the course record for an age grouper in 8 hours 24. So, where did you qualify for Kona?
So I was actually so to go back a little bit further in 2017, I planned to do Kona. Um, that was my aim, I always had that big goal of doing it in 2017. But and I did Ironman New Zealand and I qualified, but my wife was pregnant, and Bella was due right around the race period, and she actually ended up being born on race day. So I didn't go and do it on that particular year, but then as a result, everything got pushed back, and then 2018 became the kind of the big goal of the year was to try and win the age group overall in Kona. I think like I did Kona as in 2015 as an age grouper, and I came sixth in my age group. I think I did 9:15 in that particular race. But having said that, when I finished the race, I remember talking to my dad, and I was like, yeah, I can definitely win that race. Looking at the times of what the winner did and looking what I did and how my prep went, I was like, yeah. So it was always from that point on, it was always a long-term goal to try and win the age group overall in Kona. Yeah, and that ended up happening. It was supposed to happen in 2017, but it ended up happening in 2018. And I qualified in 2018 in Taupo in March. Yeah. So I took my slot and I broke the course record in Taupo that year. I went 8:35. So everything was kind of moving nicely forward. I just had Jan van Berkel over in New Zealand and Terenzo. I was coaching Terenzo at the time, so we were doing a lot of training together. It was a great day because Jan was fourth, had a bit of a breakthrough race at the time. I'd won the age group and Terenzo won the overall as well for the first time and broke the course record. So it was a bit of a special day. I always remember that one.
Yeah. Okay. So you've qualified in March, and so you've got, what's that, 7 months until you go over to Hawaii. So how did you break that down?
So I took a bit of a break after Ironman New Zealand, which was pretty cool. Had a long break, and then I just started the building really, but unfortunately I got a stress fracture in my sacrum in just in May time. So that put a bit of a hampered the progress. So I had to get over that. But then I think by the time maybe August came around, early August, I was starting to get back into it again, and I was kind of recovered. And then I was building towards then I started doing the full build like I normally do, similar structure week to what we've already talked about. So that's the way I like to do it. I was doing, the really good thing was I had Terenzo. The best thing about that whole period was me and Terenzo were training a lot together, and he lived just one bay along from me, so we do pretty much everything together, and that really brought along my ability because he was just such a prolific trainer. Obviously, he's super talented, and until he was having like a blitzer of a year as well. He was just crushing everything. He won New Zealand. He then went away and he won more and more races, like doing the 4 races back to back. He came third in Cairns, but then he had the last period was hampered because he then had his bike accident. So from that period on, I was kind of training on my own a little bit more. But he did come back. He came back and he started to get back into it, and that was in around the September time, September, late August. We started to train together again. But yeah, that was kind of the prep was really good for Kona. Me and Terenzo actually went out there on a training camp in September as well, which I think really helped. That was but the same principles always applied, and almost the same prep and sessions that I did in the lead up in 2018 were identical to what I did in California. Pretty much not much changed. And my philosophy as an athlete and a coach is that once you have a formula that works, the biggest mistake you can make is just think you want to change anything. And keeping things the same with mild tweaks and variations on what you're doing is always the path to success. Big changes in your training is 9 times out of 10 always a mistake, which is why the worst athletes are the ones who are switching coaches all the time, and the best athletes are the ones who have consistent relationships with their coaches. And I think it's for that reason.
Yeah, that's stability. So just humor me here a little bit. I know we've started to touch on it with answers to previous questions, but you just mentioned it again now. You kind of got that formula that works for you. You're looking at that 20 to 25 hours a week. You've got your 3 key swims that are 5K a piece, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then you've got some more supporting swims on the Tuesday and Thursday. Long stuff on the weekend, but can you just fill in the gaps in terms of Monday through to Sunday in terms of your training week leading into an Ironman?
Yeah, for sure. So Monday, like I said, was an easy day. So I'd swim 5K in the morning, and I'd either do like an easy ride and an easy run, or just an easy run, depending on how I'm feeling. So that easy ride would be anywhere between an hour and a half, and then a 30 to an hour run, depending on what I'm doing. Tuesdays would typically I would do another long ride, but I do it inside. So it'll be around 3 hours, sometimes up to 3.5. I'd start at 6 and be off by 9:30, getting and then cracking into some work. But I'd always have a bit of quality in there as well. It's not just like riding. I'd ride on the rollers in Zwift, and I'd also do some sets in there, which would typically be, a bit of everything in there, a bit of threshold, a bit of Ironman power, a bit of 70.3 power, like longer reps. Session that I'd often do would be like 4x30 minutes, where you do the first 10 minutes like building down your power, then settling into Ironman power, that sort of thing. Then Wednesday I would do swimming in the morning and a longer run. So that would be anywhere from an hour and a half to 2 hours, and I do that back to back. And I think this is actually something that is a really good top tip: is doing your swim to runs, like long runs. It makes that long run so much harder, and I reckon you get so many more gains from doing the long run that way. So I would basically swim from 5:30 till 7 a.m. and then I would be running so 5:30 to 7 a.m. Then I'd be running by 7:38, 2 hour run. I'd be done by 10, and then and the training's done for the day. But I've done like a massive session, like we're doing a 2 hour run, 3.5 hours, and the swim would be high. The swim would be high quality. Sorry, the swim would be high quality as well. So I found that worked really, really well. And then
just 1 second there on your Wednesday. I'm going to self-insert myself here. I do that on a Friday morning. I swim with our squad, and then I go and do a long run, sort of on my way home. And I do find it very, very hard. It's hard to explain. I'm not running hard, but it's just harder because of being depleted after the swim, I suppose.
But I think it gives a lot more. I think it gives a lot more context to that run as well. And I got interviewed the other week, and they said, what's the biggest mistake most triathlon coaches make, or most athletes make, and it's they don't think within the context of swim, bike, run. They think of triathlon. They think within the context of swim, bike, run, and doing things under fatigue gives more context to your running. It's like, there's no point running 3Ks really well fresh. You've got to run 3Ks really well off the bike. And I think like that's where the positioning and the timing of sessions is really good and really critical. So that was how the Wednesdays typically unfolded. Thursdays would be in the morning. I'd do something a bit more high end on the bike, so it would be like a longer VO2 max set. So talking like session that I did before. What session did I do? It was a session I did before California. Would be like 10 3-minuters, and I'd build up. So I'd be doing the last three, start at like 2 at 370, 2 at 380, 2 at 390, 2 at 400, and then 2 at 410, like that kind of thing. Like, so building up, but it's all like all above my threshold power. So it's pretty hard, but longer reps. Another session I would typically do would be like 5x8 minutes, where you do two at threshold, one just above threshold, and 2 at threshold. That's a really hard session. But those kind of longer, more challenging, higher end power sessions I would do on a Thursday. And that would typically be followed by a run off the bike on the treadmill. And that could be anything from iron pace to 70.3 pace. Sometimes I do threshold work. Sometimes I do 400s, but it would be something that's got a little bit more speed and a little bit harder. Fridays would be easy, so that would be the swim. The only day I do swimming. Or on a Wednesday as well, I would typically do a short, like a bit of strength and conditioning core session after that run, like typically 30 minutes, just a bit of band work and core work, some planks and stuff. Going back to Friday, I would do I would do just a swim. I'd take the rest of the day off. Saturday would be a longer ride, incorporating either some longer hill reps, like 4x15 minutes, which would be 4 to 5 hours in total, with a runoff, which would be around 8 to 10K. And then Sunday would be long run, with a bit of gym in the evening as well.
All right, thanks for that. And just a little question that I thought of as you were speaking: if you were to target a 70.3, I'm assuming you would follow a similar structure, maybe slightly less volume and a little bit more intensity. That's more specific to the race distance.
Yeah, I think not much changes really. I wish probably, I mean, when you're doing an Ironman, I typically build up to doing 3 hour runs. I also think, that's another thing that I never got to do before Roth. I never managed to do a 3 hour run. And I think that to me, that makes a real big difference, is doing 1 3 hour run just seems to really help. But obviously, if you're doing 70.3, you don't need to be going up towards 3 hours. I think like 2 hours tops is all you need to do. And cycling, you probably don't need to be going towards 5. Four will be enough.
Okay, so let's thanks for sharing the weekly training block. I think people will listen to that on repeat and scribble notes and then try and copy you.
Yeah.
So what about you mentioned strength training, you mentioned training camps a couple of times, which obviously you have access to when you're working with your pros. Is there, have you got advice around age groupers who might not have that same privilege, and how they could potentially work in something similar?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm no different, really. I still have, even though I work with pros, I still have work at a university, and I still work for, an Olympic program. So I still have to take time off when I go to those, and apply for that time off when I go to those things. So it's no different, really. They just have to be properly planned. So particularly when I was not so much this year, but particularly in 2018, I was still it was very much like normal. Now this year, now it's a little bit different for sure, but I still did it in 2018, just like a normal worker. Right? I had to apply for leave, and I had to make that all work properly. But I think those training camps really help to give you a good boost in your training. It just has to be properly planned. I mean, I work with a number of age groupers one-on-one. We plan training camps, and we plan them at the right times around the races that they want to do, and they'll book it out, and they'll take a bit of time off work to go and do a solid week somewhere.
Fair enough. Can you tell us about your heat acclimation protocol for any race, really, but obviously definitely relevant for the Hawaii conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I use a lot of, getting into the climate as best you can is always helpful, but I use a lot of sauna. I have a sauna here in my house, which is really helpful. And even before for Kona, I didn't have a sauna, but at the university, I had a sauna and I had a heat chamber. So just using those and making sure you have some more chronic frequency of exposure. So like the sauna I would do every day, 80 to 85 degrees, 20 to 25 minutes. And I actually found that to be better than the heat chamber in the end, because I found that the heat chamber was a bit too draining. But I would just do sauna and then get to the venue. I think I was there 10 days before.
Yeah. Okay. Is that just is it 3 times a week? Is it post
Every day?
Every day doing it? Okay.
Yeah, every day in there. And I think that's the important thing, is that you want to be in there. You want that high frequency to really make a difference. Particularly like what we have, I mean, I've got a course on this, but what we typically do is like if you're 3 weeks out, you would do like a solid, you'd want to block it early, and then just before you leave, you want to just bring it down a little bit, just so you're a little bit fresher for when you're getting on the plane and traveling over. So you might do like 7 sessions the first week, 5 sessions the next week, and then the week you travel, you might do 3 or 4. So
yeah, that's interesting. I reckon that's maybe contrary to some of the other advice out there, which is sort of to build the other way, whereas you go block it early, bank the frequency, and then trail off as you get closer to travel.
Exactly,
and closer
yeah.
to the race.
I find that method to be much better, because you get onto the plane a little bit fresher, and you're going to be getting some good acclimation anyway. And when you block it early, if you get that chronic block, the plasticity of the response becomes better as you go in and out. So you want to get a good block, get up some good adaptations, and as you come in and out, you'll maintain them much more easily, which makes sense, right? Obviously.
Yep, makes sense. Anything else about that lead into Hawaii in 2018 that you think is relevant for this conversation?
What else? I don't think so. Yeah, I mean, I think Hawaii is the course is very particular, and I think I was lucky that I did spend a bit of time on the course, and I reckon it really helps, because anyone who does it will realize that that run is anything but flat. It is hilly the whole way. There is not one piece of flat road on that entire run course, and I think that is. I think the course is much harder than most people give it credit for, and you have to really get to know it to understand how to use it to your advantage.
Yeah, I think the bike's actually quite rolling. Obviously, everyone talks about Harvey, and that's sort of the main climb and descent, which can often make and break the race. I think across the field, but it's obviously talked about with the pros. But the same with the runners. It's, the heat gets spoken about, the energy level gets spoken about, but it's actually just a relentless course. And it's quite unique in that regard across swim, bike, and run. It's quite different to a lot of other courses for the obvious reasons, but there's also some less obvious reasons as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And so off the back of that, if you got maybe top, let's do something like top tips for age groupers who want to have their best race in Hawaii, whether that's course specifics, whether it's training specifics, or heat acclimation protocols. Is there things that stand out if you were working with an age grouper who wants to go and have a really good day out on the Big Island?
Well, I do think getting out there and learning the course is really important, and I mean it's easier said than done, right? But I think if you really want to do well there, I think knowing the course is critical. Obviously, heat acclimation is everything as well. There's no point. I remember someone said to me, "There's no point doing any training for Kona if you're not going to take your heat acclimation seriously." So making sure you work with someone who really knows what they're doing in that space in your build up, and having the facilities available to you is really important as well. And then like you have to be like your level of fitness to do well in Kona has to be next level. Like you just have to really focus on that one particular race. I think the best way to do well in Kona is to train meticulously and be as fit as you can on the race day, because you have to be fit but fresh. And I think one of the main mistake that most people make is they overdo they really work on the fitness, which is good, but they do it too much and then they're fresh. And we know that from the research, the more tired, the more fatigued you are, the worse you tolerate with the heat. It's worse you tolerate heat. So you got to also be fresh going into it. So less is more when it comes to doing well in Kona in terms of the taper. You got to be ready to rumble.
Yeah, I think that's just good general advice for sure. And speaking of, you said to your dad when you went there earlier, and when you're 9, 15, was 6 in your age group, that you could win the age group race. Was that just based purely on outcomes and the speeds and paces that people were running, or had you sort of gone into the data and the research around, okay, what does it take in terms of what sort of watts per kilo do you have to ride on the bike? And
it was more just based on what the winner of the age group did on that particular day. Looking at the swim and the bike and the run times that he put out, and I was thinking, that's not. It was my first time on the island, and I'd literally done no preparation, and I just felt like that was with the right preparation. You just know something intrinsically that is within the reach.
Yep.
So yeah, there was no proper data around it, but I just had the feeling of that feeling, and it was I had a bit of confidence around it.
Confidence can go a long way as well.
Mm.
So for the sake of consistency, do you want to just talk us through swim, bike, and run? Relive the glory day?
Oh, in terms of the
like we did for California, just tell us about swim, bike, run.
Man, you're really challenging my memory now.
Yeah, got to keep you on your toes.
Yeah. So the swim. I mean, I was quite nervous. I remember being quite nervous about the start, because back then it was the last year that it was a full age group start. So all the age group men started at the same time. So it was, and in 2015 when I did it, I got absolutely smashed. So I remember it was a real fight the whole time, and it was not a pleasant swim. So I was a little bit nervous about, one, getting to the front of the swim, and two, not being too caught up in the melee of it all. But thankfully I had a really good start, and I really wasn't hardly touched at all, which was amazing. And I just got into a group, and basically I had quite a chilled swim. I was almost doing catch up at the back of this group, just kind of hanging out. Especially on the way back in, just relaxing. Got onto the bike, a 54-minute swim, and it was I just remember thinking, oh my god, there are so many people around me right now. Like back then, there was just like cyclist after cyclist coming past me all around you, and I was just really, really conscious of not getting a drafting penalty. So I was trying to like position myself to stay within the group and try and race, stick with the power, and not get a drafting penalty. And and over time, it was really hectic going through the town, but then get back onto the Queen Kate gradually just kind of settled itself down. And then and there was a group that went off up the road, and from memory in that group was what's his name? Sven, is it Sven Sveningsson?
Rasmus Svenningsson. Is he racing pro now?
Yeah, he's racing pro now, and he won Lake Placid not last year, the year before, I think.
Oh, I'm thinking of someone else.
I think it's Sven Sveningsson or something. But yeah, I think that's his name.
That's a good name. Let's go with that name.
Yeah, it's a good name. But he's a beast on the bike, and he was at the road when there was about four, maybe there was another 5 or 6 age groupers at the road in the group, but I was in the group behind, and basically I was on. We were kind of that group was big though, and I was on the front going up to Harvey most of the way, and then made the turn. Came back down, and by the time we got down to the bottom, what group was about 20 people was down to 3 of us, and then then we kind of came all the way back, and we were all together. But it was good. I mean, I remember feeling pretty fresh, really. I remember, I got to the point where 180k doesn't phase you anymore, and I remember coming towards the end, and I was still feeling like loads of energy. My legs were fresh. I was pedaling really smoothly. I remember going up Scenic Drive. I went up there at like 320 watts, and it just came out so easily. And I think, all right, we're in a pretty good spot here, because I've clearly got a lot left in the tank. So came out off the bike, touched down, started running through transition. I kind of knew my legs were feeling pretty good at that point. I picked up the wrong shoe bag. So I got to my shoes, and I opened this bag, and it weren't my shoes. So I had to run back and get my own shoes. So I lost that group that I was in, and I got onto the run. I think I was in 8th position. But I knew that my running was on point. I knew that I was in very good run shape. So I was pretty happy and confident to have got onto the run. And I just settled into my pace, and gradually got through the field. And I think I took the lead about the 20k mark, just to the lead of the age group race, and and then I just how I remember having one of those days that I was just running, and I kept seeing sub 4 minute K, and my heart rate was in check, and then I thought, okay, let's just get through the energy lab, and when you get onto the energy lab, let's see where you're at. And I ran up through the energy lab, that uphill K, I ran in a 420. I remember, you say you challenge your memory, but I remember some things quite well. And I was thinking, oh, okay, that's running up through the energy lab at this point in the race in a 420 is pretty good running. This is solid. And then I got to the top back onto the Queen K, which is about 10k to go. And I was, I was still running so I had some 4 minute Ks in there, and some 4 minute Ks here and there. And I was like, and I knew by that point I was 10 minutes in front. And I was,
oh wow!
I was like, oh, I'll just do. I had this thing. I knew that the course record was on target, because I knew that I'd bike to 4:30, and I knew that I swam at 54. So I'd done the maths in my head, and I knew that the course record was on target. And I thought, just keep pushing to see. It'd be good to kind of knock that course record out of sight a little bit. But yeah, but I kept on thinking, oh, you should slow down now. You don't have to run any faster. But I kept accidentally running too fast. So
a very rare problem, isn't it?
Yeah,
at the back end of a marathon. It's very easy to do in the front end of a marathon.
Yeah, it was just one of those days that was really good. I mean, the only time I really felt it is when I ran down Polani. That downhill really blew my quads a little bit, but apart from that, I had very good legs. And then that was you dream of certain situations, and you visualize certain things in your mind, and they don't often come true. And I'm pretty fortunate that I've had that on a few occasions in my life. So I'm thankful for that.
Good day. So 8:24 it still stands. We'll see if it gets taken in the coming years.
Yeah, we'll see. Well, the records are there to be broken.
That's
I
right.
think,
There's currently 50% less opportunity to do it. Like you got to wait every second year. So
yeah,
that kind of
exactly.
helps you. Was that you lobbying for it to be moved to Kona?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Lucy still went faster than she actually was 3 seconds faster than my time this year, crazily. So, yeah.
I think it's okay to be beaten by Lucy Charles Barkley. Maybe it isn't in your head, but it's
No.
not too bad. It's good company at the very least.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
but I think these records are to be broken, of course, and I think and it will definitely be broken at some point, of course. Just I mean, even the technology alone has come on so far in terms of like the front end setups and stuff like that, So yeah, we'll see, but it's not we've been fortunate that Kona's been really, really good conditions for the past few years. So I think we're due for a day where it's just hot as hell and windy as hell, and then hopefully we'll be back to normal Kona times.
yeah, yeah. Um, yeah. Thanks for the recap there. Last thing on Hawaii, then we'll get into some tips and training specifics. But this stood out for me. I remember sort of I think you were on a couple of podcasts and in a couple of magazine articles, and you said that winning that race sort of really put your name on the map. And you said at the top of the show that you've got many publications, you've got a lot of history in the science of the sport and been involved at high level sport, but you got lots of coaching inquiries off the
Yeah, I
back of
did. Yeah,
this because you're
yeah,
a fast athlete. People thought you would be a good coach.
yeah,
Can you tell
yeah.
us a little bit about that? Were you ready for that? And again, have you had a similar experience now after California and going sub 8?
Not as much after California, but I think it's because people were a bit more aware of me. As no one was aware of me at all before Kona, I think. But yeah, I mean, definitely like athletes like to have a fast coach for some reason, and yeah, it's a funny thing because like me as an athlete myself, there's no way I would put any clout on how good an athlete is themselves when I made a decision for them to be my coach. But obviously I think it is important to many people, which was clear from my experience. But yeah, it's yeah, but I'm not complaining because
No,
fortunately
no.
I have the fortunately for me I have the triple threat, so which I don't think many people have, so that's good.
Yeah, the science, the coaching, and then your own athletic ability.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
no, I think that's quite good, quite well rounded. Obviously, serving you quite well, so that's good.
Yeah.
All right, so we've talked a lot about. We're going to move into a couple of tips, and so people can come away from this with some tips. We've obviously talked a lot about Dan Plews, the athlete, and the way you do things. We talked a lot about your go-to sessions and what an Ironman block looks like. Do you have a favorite session? Is there a session that stands out when I ask that question?
I like the hard bike sessions and the run-offs. I just feel so satisfied after that. Like the longer threshold, longer VO2. So like a typical session could be like 6 by 6 minutes where you do two at your threshold power and then two just above your threshold power, then two at your threshold power. I love that type of session with like a run off that's you're starting a little bit faster and settling into your Ironman pace. I really enjoy those sorts of sessions, and I feel that I like them because they're hard, but you don't feel too beat up after them. Whereas when you do like a really long, like 4 by 40 minutes at Ironman power, they're good and you feel satisfied, but you just good for nothing after the session because you're so
Mm.
tired. So they're the sorts of sessions that I like. But I think every session's it's dependent on where you are at the time. I think you find more enjoyment doing the things that you're most ready for at that particular period of time. I mean, if I was really, really unfit and not ready for a threshold session, I probably wouldn't enjoy it that much. But I do really like those sessions. But and also just I love going long as well. Like
Mm.
the long rides, the 6 7 hour rides is something that I really really enjoy doing as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So you like a bit of high intensity, but you like it more if you're ready for it. But you, at the same time, you do love your long endurance work
Yeah,
as well, and just
exactly.
getting out for hours on end.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of training. I love training. I think I've always enjoyed the process of being a triathlete because I enjoy training so much. And yeah, there's nothing better. Particularly like remember I did some rides with Chelsea and Jan in St. Moritz earlier in the year, and just riding in the mountains and doing we did like this 6-7 hour ride, and it was just like so good. I mean, that sort of thing is the best, is riding in the mountains and just going long. That doesn't get much better than that.
Yeah, that's a good one. One other thing I just thought of, I've been wanting to ask you this for a while, but you often do the descending runs off the bike, even in an Ironman block. So 10Ks, but going 4K, oh, sorry, 1K the fastest, like maybe 320 pace for you, and then going the 2Ks at 330, 3Ks at 340, and then the final 4Ks at 350, which is kind of your Ironman pace. Is that just something you like to do? Is that your accelerated fatigue, or is there another theory or reason for those type
Yeah,
of sessions?
the main reason is like Ironman and doing well in Ironman is all about doing things with fatigue, and that's what I always try and emulate. So I'll do that a lot on the bike as well, was you start hard and settle into your Ironman pace, whereas doing it the opposite way around where you're starting slow and building into it, it's not how we do things. If you consider what Ironman is, you're holding on for the last 10K, and that's the hardest bit. So it's really hard to emulate that in training. So the best way you can do it is kind of do harder efforts at the start, fatigue yourself a little bit, and then settle into pace. It's also really good from a heart rate monitoring perspective, because if you can go out hard, it makes the session much more equal. Because what you generally find is if you do like a 1K, 2K, 3K, 4K, your heart rate's actually the same the whole way through. So you'll get out and your heart rate will jump to 160 because you're doing a 1K so hard, and it'll get there really quick, and then you'll drop the pace and it'll stay at 160. Then you'll drop the pace again, it'll stay in 160, and it gives you a really nice stable profile as well. So you get more time at a higher heart rate, which is great training as well.
Yeah, I knew some thought had gone into it, but I just thought I'd clarify. You obviously love training. Have you got a sort of a least favorite session or something that you kind of dread,
Just
um,
just
but you have to do it
swimming,
anyway?
really. Swimming in general.
That's such a common answer. Yeah, fair enough.
No, that's not true. I just never really liked swimming that much. I mean, I think it's something to do with being, especially, I love swimming in Australia. You're more fortunate than us because you've just only got 50-meter outdoor pools. I love a bit of that. But like when it's an indoor chlorinated pool, I don't not enjoy it. I just don't enjoy it as much. And I'm not convinced being inside that chlorine is that great for your health overall either, which is why I'm not really doing any swimming anymore. And if the only swimming I'm doing is in the sea. So
Yeah, okay. Speaking of the swimming, do you have a swim tip for age groupers? Like if there was just one that you could give. I know it's again a cliche question, but
yeah, well, I think working, I think the biggest thing that I think I see the biggest mistake in age groupers is that they try and swim like they're swimming in a pool. So they'll go and see a swim coach and they're all like counting your strokes, gliding, distance per stroke. This is the worst advice anyone can give someone who is trying to swim well in the open water. So my advice, if you really want to get good at swimming for a triathlon, think about the context of swimming in. It's a swim in the ocean, in a lake, in a river, before you're going to go and do a bike. So you need to think about how your swimming looks. You don't want to be doing a big leg kick. You don't want to be over gliding. You don't want to be doing. You want to be having a quicker stroke rate, because that's the best thing. That's the way you're going to swim best when it comes to racing. So I think that's the biggest mistake I see is athletes being obsessed with distance per stroke and counting the strokes and trying to glide and kick as much as they can, because it just never ends that well for when it comes to racing.
I'm glad you said that. I might have to grab that soundbite and share it with some people. Number one bike tip.
Number one bike tip is get your equipment dialed in. I think that's a massive piece. I don't think when I say equipment, I don't think it means buy a disc wheel and but I think there's some very big basics that you can get right quite cheap. So, position on the bike is number one. So getting a bike that fits you and you've been properly fitted and your position's suitable and aerodynamic and comfortable. I think that's the main thing. But then also like just spending your money on the right things, which would be like probably an aero helmet and calf guards for your bang for your buck. And not just going and getting a disc wheel and doing those sorts of things, spending your money wisely, because those things can really make a big difference.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think that's been a massive progression in the sport in general, but even in the age group ranks in the last few years is just people's fit and being dialed in with equipment. And it doesn't have to be really expensive stuff either.
No.
Yeah, so that's a good one.
You can get some calf guards. They're about $50 and they actually make a reasonable difference.
Yep. And then run tips number one run tip for age groupers.
Number one run tip for age groupers. I think that when it comes to running, I would definitely have someone look at running forms, something that's often overlooked. So making sure that you can't really change that much of your running, but I think what I've found in the past is that if you can work with someone who has some skills in the area where they look at the way you run and they can help you with some exercises to help you with your running, I think that's really helpful. What I mean by that is, you might be dropping your right shoulder, and often people say, "Oh, you're dropping your right shoulder, lift it up a bit." But normally, it's something to do with your muscularity or your imbalances or whatever. And there are some really good people out there who can help you work to kind of fix your running and make you more fluid. There's a guy called Matt Pendola who works with Chelsea, who I did a bit of work with before California, and he specializes in this area. And I find that to be really good. And I think for a lot of age groupers, it's something that you should definitely consider looking at. And then the other big tip for running would be you don't have to run that much. You don't have to run massive volumes to be a good runner. Frequency is important, but I think you can do a lot with just 50K of running a week. You don't have to be running 80 to 100K. I think being the consistency is key. And what I typically do is I don't really do much fast running until just before racing. So all my runs with myself and the athletes that I coach, I do most of the higher intensity work on the bike and in the swim, and then I do tempo running, and that's tempo running and long slow distance running, and that's it with a few harder runs before competition. And I think doing track sessions every week and pushing and doing VO2 max run sessions is a fast way to make you very fatigued and likely cause you some injuries as well.
Yeah, I think that's another good tip and another soundbite, I reckon, that should be shared far and wide. Things that people think make them fast versus what actually makes them fast. And, you don't have to do heaps of volume and heaps of high intensity. Yeah,
everyone loves a track session, right? But I just don't think they're enjoyable, but I just don't think they have their place very often in the triathlons training and the triathlete training schedule. Like I said, like the only time, I did those 1Ks 3 times before Ironman California, and that was the only time I touched the track the entire year. So I would have done it just before or off, but I never managed to do it. But that I would only really do that sort of running in the last 4 weeks before a big race. And by that time, my injury risk is low, right? Because I've done so much running and I'm so resilient and I'm so fit and I'm light. So it's something to be considered.
Well, that's the icing on the cake, but you've got a really good base layer.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then tips for integrating strength training.
Yeah. So, if I have to say there's one thing, 2018 to 2023, 5 years later, so 36 to 41, the biggest difference that I did between those 5 years was I integrated strength training into my training plan, and I think it's really made a big difference to my injury risk. And I actually saw the physio and osteo less than I ever have in my life before I went and did California. Whereas before Ironman, I was, and before Hawaii, I was actually getting a lot of treatment nearly all the time. And I really think it was the strength training that made the difference. Just in general resilience, and how I seem to just not get as many niggles. And often I can have a niggle, do strength training, and it wouldn't be there anymore. It would be crazy. But I think getting the right strength training and doing it right is really important. So I think that's a really big thing. But it doesn't have to be much. Like 2 30-minute sessions a week, if it's done right, is enough to make a difference. So yeah, I would definitely consider that. We're just about to launch a brand new course, LDT 301, which is all about the integration of strength training into the long distance triathlon training plan. So yeah, it'll be out like in a couple of weeks' time. So if you want to check that out, yeah, check it out.
Yeah, sounds good.
You can sign up now. Like there's pre sign-ups already. So
yeah, cool. Great. And then what would you say is the biggest mistake you've made in your athletic career, or one or two mistakes that you've made and potentially people can learn from what you did? Obviously you would have, and you would have changed it, but is there anything that stands out with that question?
One thing that really, I've asked this question before. One thing that stands out to me is one of my only regrets I have in my whole career in doing triathlon is I wish I moved to the longer distance earlier than I did. It took me a long time to do it. I think I was about 30 and when I originally made that shift, and inevitably I'm way better at the longer distance, way better. And I wish I'd listened to some coaches at Loughborough University at the time and told me I should consider doing it, because that's where my physiology seemed to be lending itself to. But I didn't, because I wanted to be good at the Olympic distance. And yeah, that's kind of a regret. So I think there's a bit of merit to not going too early, but I think you have to kind of follow where your strengths lie and go with that. So that's one thing. And the other thing that really ruined my early career as in my 20s to 30s was just a high carbohydrate diet. I was told that carbohydrates were the way. I was told that you can't eat enough carbs, and it just meant I was always overweight, always hungry, never really recovered that well from training. And changing my diet to a lower carb diet is actually the thing that made me go from like a 410 70.3 to sub 4. And that was actually the thing that made me inevitably win Kona and do what I've done. I don't think if I hadn't made those changes to my diet, none of this would have ever happened. So that's the other thing. Mistake was listening to conventional nutrition advice and chowing down as many carbs as they can, both outside and inside of racing.
Yeah, that's interesting, because obviously that's one thing you're kind of known for in the industry. And more recently, there's been a shift back to the higher carbohydrate way of eating, way of fueling.
Yeah, there has. Yeah,
it's a tricky mix with age groupers and make sure they're getting enough.
Yeah, I mean,
and how to do that.
Yeah, I mean, you'll see. I'm trying to fight very hard against it because there's no evidence for it. I'm yet to see a study that shows that type of high in carbohydrate ingestion is beneficial for performance, and if anything, it's showing the opposite, and it's quite clear. So, we're trying to work on a few publications in this space, but I think like the amount of carbohydrates you need. I'm not saying everyone needs to go on like a ketogenic diet, but it's nowhere near 400 to 600 grams a day, and I think you get a lot more bang for your buck when you specifically manipulate your carbohydrates around training. That's one of the main things that I've learned to do. That's again made me quite competitive with 20 hours of training a week because of that specific the right fuel, right time approach. But what I always say is it's all about finding your sweet spot. So if you're monitoring enough things, whether it's your HRV, your blood glucose, how you feel in training, whether you can still do the high intensity stuff, if all that's in time, then you're at the right carbohydrate level. And for most people, that's between 100 and 200 grams a day. In my experience, it's certainly not between 300 and 400 grams, or even 600, as some people advice goes down. Yeah.
Interesting. So your tip for age groupers in that regard is reduce the carbohydrate intake, and is it replacing it with other things? or is it sort of working with a professional and trying to that
Yeah, I mean,
right place,
I
right
think
time?
you have to work with with someone who knows what they're doing a little bit. But of course, if you're reducing your carbohydrates, you have to increase your protein and your fat, because overall energy balance is really, really important as well. So you can't just reduce your carbohydrates and not replace it with anything else, right?
Yeah.
I just think, like, from a training perspective, from an adaptation perspective, from a generally, health, not from not necessarily from a weight loss perspective. I mean, it definitely helped me from a weight loss perspective, but it doesn't, if you look at the research in terms of diets, there's really no diet that works better than any other. They're all the same. It's just what you can adhere to the best. And for me, I can adhere to a lower carb diet for a very long. I've been doing it since 2012, and I find it really easy to do. I can't say I'm doing it now because I'm trying to bulk up a bit of. I'm just trying to get more calories in because I'm trying to bulk. But yeah, I think yeah, it's all about finding out, working with a professional, finding out what works, finding out what works for you, really.
Yeah, like with many things. And the other one you touched on there just briefly was HRV. Obviously, that's what your PhD is in. Can you how do you use HRV? How do you implement that into your training? And again, what would your advice be for age groupers who were intrigued by the use of HRV and how they could practically
Yeah, I mean, so when it comes to training, you've got to think of it as a the training is really, really simple. Is that there's a stimulus and there's a response. So if you have the correct stimulus and you have the correct response, you are automatically going to be getting better. The problem comes when you have a poor stimulus, so your training's wrong. So you're training for an Ironman and all you're doing is bench press and hill sprints, right? That's not going to be a very good stimulus for an Ironman. For the most obscure example, to take it to the other level. But then the response is, okay, how's my body coping with this? Am I adapting in the right way? And most triathletes and most coaches, they do very well in the stimulus part, working at the right thresholds, getting the training right, but they're not very good at the response part. So they have no way of knowing if they're adapting and coping with the training. And looking at trends and using HRV is the best way you can objectively quantify the response. So if you have an athlete who's got the right stimulus, and then they have like a good, like stable increasing HRV, you know that the response is also right. If you're that same athlete has the right stimulus who has unstable, permanently decreasing HRV, you know that the response is wrong. It does not necessarily mean that the training could be too hard, or they might have work stress and not getting enough sleep and all those sorts of things. So that's typically how I use HRV, is to make sure that the response is right to the training that's being given. But you can measure HRV in loads of different ways. Whoop, Oura ring, HRV for training. But like I say to everyone who asks me the question, what should I get? It doesn't matter what you get because they're all good, but the interpretation is everything. And 9 times out of 10, these devices don't give you enough in terms of interpretation, which is why you have to work with someone who knows what they're talking about when it comes to the interpretation of the data.
Great. One last thing, because you mentioned your physiological profile and being better suited to long course, and you were sort of given that advice early on, but kind of ignored it and then sort of came to the same conclusion. What sort of testing do you implement with age groupers, and what do you do yourself? Obviously, you have access to labs through the university, but are there any sort of field tests that age groupers can you do and you think are useful in that regard?
I mean, not really, not in the field. I mean, I was becoming a fan of like doing a 5 minute. I mean, I think 5 minute power is good for a VO2 max as a field test. VLA max points you in the right direction for anaerobic capacity. But like, you just can't get by getting in a lab. We talked about things that you can spend your money on. I think, spending your money on a lab testing and getting your zones and profiling done correctly is a very good use of funds. Because there's a lot of field tests out there, but they're all estimations on estimations. They're all modeling based on data that's based on an estimate. So even like VLA max, there was just a new study that was brought out that showed that VLA max has a 19% day-to-day variation. So you could have a 19% difference in someone's VLA max value from one day to the next. And for those who don't know, VLA max, it kind of is an indirect marker of anaerobic capacity. So you imagine now that there's platforms out there that use VLA max to determine thresholds and determine substrate use, fat versus carbohydrate combustion. And if you get a 19% day-to-day variation, it's not going to be giving you a very good value in another estimation that it's trying to assume, right? So I've kind of, as much as I think they can give a bit of guidance, you can't get by getting into the lab and doing some proper testing.
Yeah, your approach very much seems like you sort of know the demands of the event, and if you've sort of got a goal or a target time, like whether it's a positioning, you sort of know what sort of time you have to do. Therefore, you work backwards from that, and you train specifically for the demands of the event in the location, and the taking into account the topography of the course, and you sort of work backwards from there, and then you've obviously worked out that formula that works for you, and you stick to that, and you know what you need to do over that period of time, and then you'll arrive to race days well prepared. So getting too sort of finicky with specific details and numbers and data points is not necessarily overly useful, or shouldn't put too much emphasis on that, maybe.
Yeah, well, but I do think knowing your thresholds and knowing where things lie is really important from you still have to prescribe a threshold training session is still a threshold training session, and you still need to know where that lies ish. And also, even from monitoring, like when you're doing your runs and you might be doing the Ironman pace, you need to know whether it's realistic or not. So if you don't know where your LT1 or VT1 heart rate is, how on earth are you supposed to ascertain whether that pace is appropriate for an Ironman? You can might be running at 4-minute Ks at a heart rate that's closer to, you might be able to do it, but if your heart rate's closer to VT2 than VT1, then you're not going to be able to do it in an Ironman, right? So I think it's still those physiological values are important to know, not necessarily a little bit from a training prescription standpoint, but then also from a monitoring standpoint to actually know what you're looking at.
Yeah, it's a good summary. Anything else you'd like to talk about?
No, I think that's good. I think we covered a lot of good, hopefully useful information for everyone.
Yeah, well, obviously this was supposed to be about Dan Plews, the athlete, so we definitely talked a lot about that. But naturally, it was going to go into a little bit of science and HRV and fueling and training stimulus and testing and so forth. And we've definitely covered a lot of ground. The final question from me is: your dad still going to Taupo, and will you be joining him?
Yeah, so my dad is going to Taupo. He's doing it. He's ready to go. 72 years of age. So, but I will not be joining him.
No,
I still had my slot ready to go, and I got asked to validate, put it in post. Actually, it came just post California, but I just let it go. So, no, I'm not doing that one. So,
so you've the ship has sailed. Then you've broken your dad's heart, and the ship has sailed.
Yeah, well, yeah. COVID broke my dad's heart, because otherwise I would have done it in 2020.
Yeah, long time.
Yeah, it's a long time ago. I mean, it's funny, I qualified for that race in 2020, and that's going to be 2024. I mean, it's a long time to wait.
Yeah, it's been a while. I know there's some people who qualified 2019, myself included, and some of them held on to it. I was the same as you. I've let it go. If I want to go back, I'll requalify.
Yeah.
Probably not the smartest decision for the with inflation rates and the cost of the entry now. But I was the same as you. My ego was kind of saying, well, if I want to go again, I'll requalify. So
yeah. And by that point, I'm going to be too massive and muscular, so I won't be doing it. Won't be any good anymore.
Yeah, you'll be unrecognizable. You'll have to bulk up and then come back again, maybe when you're 50.
Do a big
do it again.
And one of the reasons I'm kind of going down the strength training realm is because I think, I'm 40 and I want to be as big and as strong as I possibly can be by the time I get to 50 from a health and longevity perspective. That's kind of the main aim. But also, if I don't do this, I think I'll just get sucked back into endurance training, So, I think it's one way to make sure that I won't have any choice but to carry on being more of a hybrid athlete.
Yeah, well, that's all the rage as well, the hybrid athlete. So watch this
Yeah,
space. Dan
yeah,
Plews.
yeah. We'll see. We'll see.
All right, well, Dan, thank you very much for coming on and speaking with us and sharing all that you did and really going into the details. I said to you before we started recording that, the whole premise of this Diary of an Age Grouper podcast was sort of to have, somewhat selfishly have conversations with athletes that I want to have conversations with. And obviously, you sort of made a name for yourself 2018 onwards in particular. And I've sort of followed your individual journey. But definitely some things I got to talk to you about today and ask you that I've been wanting to for a while. And they just sit in the back of my head whenever I hear you on a podcast or read about it. Definitely very intriguing and inspiring. So thank you for your time. Thank you for coming on and going into detail. And I'm sure people will really enjoy it and get a lot out of it.
Cool. No, thanks for having me on.
Yes.
Thanks, Sammy. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening to the Diary of an Age Grouper podcast. If you have any questions, feedback, or ideas for future guests, please contact us via the Diary of an Age Grouper Instagram page. Alternatively, you can email info@jetcoaching.com.au. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. This podcast was born to discuss all things age group triathlon. As an athlete, coach, and fan of the sport, I've always been intrigued with different approaches to training and how to optimize an individual's performance. We will speak to athletes who perform at a high level, as well as those with an interesting story. We will speak to coaches with a vast array of experience, and also experts in various fields. We want to sift through what the physiology labs tell us, as well as what we see the pros doing, and take the lessons that apply to us. This is the Diary of an Age Grouper.